Okay. Can you hear me? Yes? Okay, the mic is working. Perfect. So welcome everybody to our international symposium on nature-based solutions in urban water systems, fostering just, sustainable and resilient urban transformations. That's the title of our event. And my name is Johannes Langemeyer. I'm working at the Institute of Environmental Science and Technology here in Barcelona, and together with my colleague Sarah Maestre, working at my institute as well, at the same institute, we are going to guide you through this event today. We have two blocks of this event. We have the first hour, that's the part that we're going to have in English with our international project partners, giving you an introduction of what our partners are doing in their hometowns and where they stand. And we are taking this part for getting inspired of how nature-based solutions in the wider sense can support us in addressing urban water challenges. And then we have the second part after the coffee break. That will be the zoom in on Barcelona. So we're going to have a workshop on discussing about the perspectives for Barcelona, how to trigger transformations in the city of Barcelona, and this will be the part where we hope to get you proactively engaged. We have the first part of the session with our audience online as well, plus the people here in the room in the Casa Convalescencia. And the second part of the symposium then will only be for the people in the room, and that we will do in Catalan and in Spanish. Pass on the mic to Sarah for doing the introduction and welcome in Catalan as well, before starting the program.
Bé, benvinguts i benvingudes a totes. Aquest simposi internacional organitzat pel projecte NICHES, que com ja sabeu es titula Fomentant solucions basades en natura en els sistemes d'aigua urbans, fomentant transformacions justes, resilients i sostenibles. Ha estat organitzat pel Johannes Langemeyer i per mi mateixa, la Sara Maestre, de l'Institut de Ciència i Tecnologia Ambiental, l'ICTA, de la Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. I aquest simposi té dos grans objectius. El primer és il·lustrar, donar a conèixer experiències internacionals sobre com s'han implementat aquestes solucions basades en natura i, en segon lloc, centrar-nos en analitzar el cas concret de Barcelona i de l'àrea metropolitana. L'estructura de l'acte d'avui compta amb dues parts. La primera es desenvoluparà en anglès i serà tant en persona, diguéssim, aquí a la Casa Convalescència, com virtualment, i constarà d'una sèrie de presentacions fetes per diferents investigadors i investigadores sobre aquests exemples il·lustratius de solucions basades en natura, i la segona part del simposi d'avui es desenvoluparà en català i serà només presencial aquí a la Casa Convalescència i abordarem el cas concret de Barcelona i l'àrea metropolitana, quins reptes, quins problemes té el sistema actual de sanejament i de gestió de les aigües pluvials, així com quin és el futur desitjat. Per tant, us donem la benvinguda i moltes gràcies a tots i totes per assistir.
Thanks, Sarah. And we are moving to getting to know you a little bit better. So we have prepared here a small Slido, and we would like to ask you to take your phones out and screen the barcode. This might be a little bit later for the people online, so don't worry if there's some confusion here. And this is to tell you that we are organizing these kind of science policy exchange events since 10 years already here in Barcelona. We have focused so far more on the part of the greening, so excuse us if we are a little bit green on the water issues still, at least from the ICTA UAB team. But we want to use this event to bridge between the urban greening people and the people that are more focusing on the water issues here in Barcelona and beyond in this European project. Okay, we're seeing the first answers coming in. 15 answers already. Researchers are in front. Okay, we have 25 responses, almost 30 responses already. That's almost the people in the room. Great. Okay, we leave it here. We have a lot of people from research and education, from public and public authorities, from government and authorities, and we have a few professionals. But we don't have many business representatives or civil society representatives in the room, so we need to get better on that for the next events. One from the media. Okay, switching to the second question. Which of these problems do you think are the most relevant in the city of Barcelona? Even if you're not from here, you might guess, and then we will get the chance to discuss that later on. Drought and water scarcity. Water quality. Well, we've seen that the drought is perceived here as one of the major issues. For those of you not from here, we are in a major drought right now, so we really have problems with water scarcity, and not in Barcelona itself, where the supply is an issue here. But we also see that we have quite a focus here on water quality by issues, so the focus of our project here. I will move to the last slide of question. And that's an open question. What are you excited about this to get from today? Keep it short. New knowledge. I share that one. Okay, people want to know more about niche, sharing knowledge and ideas, inspiration, interaction, that's fine, learning and knowledge exchange, meeting new people, insights about the city management, cross scales, coffee break. There will be a coffee break, but you need to be a little bit patient. Great. Case studies, new information about nature-based solutions. We have some on that as well. Okay, and new projects in Barcelona. I think 2 people are still typing, and then we'll leave it there. Learning. Okay, I think we have covered the main points here. I think knowledge exchange and learning was very high on the agenda, both on the water and on the nature-based solutions part of the system. And I think that's our first and principal focus that we're going to have here today. So I leave it here and I pass over to McKenna Davis. McKenna Davis is a researcher at the Ecologic Institute in Berlin, and she's leading the NICHES project. Her work is focusing on management and governance issues of nature-based solutions, and I leave you the mic.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Hi to everybody online, and nice to see so many faces in the room. It's great to have you here, and thank you for the introduction. I'm going to try to keep my presentation short to give more of a focus on the case studies that we have represented here today. But just quickly to introduce NICHES and set the scene a little bit for those of you who don't know our project. So NICHES is a 3-year research project funded by Biodiversa, and we're really trying to look at combined sewage overflow and nature-based solutions, but I'll get to that in a moment. So first, just to understand a little bit what the main content is and set the scene for what we're looking at. So as many of you know, cities are increasingly facing a lot of challenges from climate change, increasing frequency and intensity of heavy rainfall events. There's an increasing amount of surface sealing, so really a lot of asphalt in the cities, a reduction of green and blue infrastructure, less chance for runoff to really be absorbed into the local water system. And all of this has the consequence that there is increasing amount of water entering the mixed sewage systems. So here in Barcelona, in Berlin, where I'm living right now, we have a large part of the city that has these mixed sewage systems, which basically means that normally you have the sewage that flows to a sewage treatment plant, as you can see here. But when there's heavy rainfall events and you have a large amount of runoff water, that also mixes into the system and ends up overflowing the system and overwhelming the capacities. And that means that we have a large output of this mixed water, so dirty water, which is contaminating and polluting the local water systems and endangering the local biodiversity. So that's what we're up against. And traditionally, a lot of these challenges are addressed by very sectoral approaches. So working separated between water management, green area management, mobility, which has to do with streets and sealing, and these different types of planning processes. There's a lot of kind of top-down approaches where the government says, okay, we have this policy idea, we'd like to implement this, but a lack of integration of society, getting really participatory, hearing what could work, joining these different perspectives and views together. And then also thinking a lot just specifically about one single objective. So in this case, about water management, really looking a lot of times at the quantity of the water that's being entering the system, or that's being produced, or that's coming through these heavy rainfall events, but not necessarily focusing on the quality of water, which of course has the implications for biodiversity and the health of the ecosystems. And really not thinking, okay, what is our actual local conditions? How can we use nature? How can we use the local scenarios, the culture of participation, the culture of cooperation and collaboration to design new and better ideas? So within the NICHES project, we want to kind of help transition to what we call a new normal. So we're looking at different aspects of how this kind of lock-in approach, we call it, but really being stuck in the ways of thinking, maybe being afraid to integrate innovative ideas, to go back to the roots, to think about nature, how all of these topics can be addressed in a new way across all of our partner cities within the project on the basis of evidence and research and cooperative participatory processes with different stakeholders. So we're trying to, again, as I said, look at mitigating and treating combined sewage overflow events. So really looking at how do we prevent this excess water from entering the system with the use of nature-based solutions and using nature, but also how do we treat this dirty water at the end, the mixed water that's coming out of these overflow events, by using nature-based solutions. So on both ends of the system. And we're looking at this society, ecology, technology approach and looking at a system. So we call it SETS, Society, Ecology, Technology Systems approach. And we're really trying to kind of push the boundaries about what's possible in water management within the urban context. And today we have the presentations that Johannes introduced, which will be highlighting our different case study cities, really looking at different aspects of this approach that we're taking and trying to really innovate within the current systems for more effective water management, both for the benefit of society but also for biodiversity. So we have these 5 case study cities. Obviously Barcelona, we're really grateful to be here today and to see all of you, but also Rotterdam and Boston as 2 of our other core cities. And then we have Berlin and Sheffield as what we call periphery cities, where we have a little bit less of the stakeholder engagement, but also looking at them from our research perspective. So I'll leave our speakers to say a little bit more about what activities are being done in each of those cities, but thank you very much for all being here today.
Thank you, McKenna, for that introduction about the project. And as a first speaker, first panelist, we have Pablo Herreros Cantis. And Pablo is now, among other things, is a PhD student at ICTA, but he was a researcher at the New York New School, and he's also affiliated with the Boss Center of Climate Change. And Pablo has worked on, or Pablo's work is focusing on how to bring in a broader perspective of vulnerabilities when planning for urban nature-based solutions in the water system. Pablo, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Johannes, and thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to focus on some previous work that we have done in the city of New York and that is supposed to feed into the NICHES project. And there's a lot to be said about the challenge or the city of New York, but I'm going to focus on how we do nowadays and what is promising about different ways in which hazards and vulnerabilities can be studied, visualized, and correlated to feed into innovative future policies that the city of New York and others like Barcelona are already working on. So McKenna said this, and you will probably hear this said many times today, but for setting the scene and the context, we know that both in the future and already in the present, extreme precipitation is getting more extreme. For example, the city of New York is located in the northeast of the country, which is the area of the United States that has both observed already and is projected to experience the highest increase in what extreme precipitation is. So looking at the past, there's already been a 55% increase on the amount of rain that falls during an extreme precipitation event, and depending on the climate change scenario, the increase could still build an additional 40%. If we, instead of looking at a longer period to the past, we focus on a particular year. 2021 is a very exemplary period for New York City, in which in a matter of just 7 weeks, the record for extreme precipitation, the maximum precipitation intensity during a limited amount of time, was broken 3 times within 7 weeks, leaving postcards of what New York City is in need of adapting to, like these ones. More than 1,000 people died drowning in basement apartments that flooded within seconds. And deliveristas such as Glovo here or Uber Eats were forced to deliver Chinese food with water up their waist, and many other sort of images that flooded Twitter and other social media accounts, showing and recording this new reality of New York City. New York City is suffering this, but it's also considered a pioneer in the way that they approach science and data to guide their policies for adapting to challenges like this. For example, in just a couple of months before this summer started, the city released their first ever stormwater resiliency plan, in which they carried out a fairly advanced modeling approach in which they, for the first time, were able to map flood risk because of extreme precipitation across the entire city, coupling their sewers and their surface. And not only did they feed this information into their own policies, their own top-down policies, but they also followed through with their exemplary attitude towards making every data that comes out public immediately. So this map was made by myself, but using the scenarios, the stormwater scenarios that feed the city's policies to adapt to climate change. So the fact that this data was made public and that it can be easily accessed enables not only researchers, but also other policymakers in other cities to take the example, or even advocacy organizations to advocate for what they think is most necessary. It's just one more step in the city's approach to starting by understanding what parts of the city are more at risk, combining hazard information, like here we see different coastal flooding scenarios based on different sea level rise probabilities for the future. And also making this data visualized in very different ways, such as here at the building level at very high resolution, combining it with other extremely important information such as social vulnerability. In this case, we will be looking at income across the city of New York. And why is it important to combine hazard and social vulnerability? Because especially in cities like New York or across the United States, there is a more than confirmed overlap between the areas that experience the highest hazard, which is where it is more probable that an extreme weather event causes impacts, such as flooding happening or extreme heat or heat waves, with the locations in which communities are more vulnerable based on income, based on poverty, based on health variables. And there's also explicit knowledge on the links between this current distribution of social vulnerability and previous segregation policies that made it very hard, for example, for communities of color to mix with communities that were white. And again, what we're looking at today is using the very same layers, the very same data that the city has made public, but what I want to also make explicit is that this data can be visualized in very different ways. We can go extremely technological, for example, with these augmented reality applications that allow you to see flooding scenarios on the street, or deploying a model of the city on a desk so that stakeholders and practitioners can discuss the city while looking at it from above. It can also be used to create compelling story maps that create a narrative and make a point that is being defended by an organization or an NGO or a civil advocacy community. Or it can just be printed and handed at a local church or a library so that people can be made conscious and educated on how they need to operate, how they need to act in the case of an anticipated flooding or a heat wave event. So this is it for me. I just want to make the strong point that we've looked at the same data represented in very different ways for very different uses, but it starts with the governments making the data publicly available. So thank you.
Thank you, Pablo, for that inspiring talk from New York. And we are passing on to Matthew Eckelman. Matthew Eckelman is the professor at the University of Northeastern University in Boston in the Department of Civil Engineering and Environmental Engineering. That's right. It. And you explain us more about nature-based solutions in Boston.
Great. Thank you very much. And nice to be here with you all. So I knew Pablo was going before me. Oh. There we go. So there's New York in the bottom left, and I'm from Boston in the top right there, pretty close. So we are also a coastal city, but we have some different issues that we've been dealing with in the history of Boston that I want to take you through, and some of the solutions to those problems, which have been traditionally from the civil engineering side, but more and more in the recent years solved through nature-based solutions. So first problem is that Boston is mostly fill material. The original city, you can see here, was an peninsula, very thin peninsula. And all of the light green area that you see was all fill material. So Boston used to be a very hilly city, and we took those hills, we chopped them off, and we put the soil and filled in these areas, especially this area called the Back Bay. The main city of Boston is called the Charles River, you can see there, and the Back Bay used to be a very large marsh full of native plants, slow-moving water. But as people moved out of the city, what did they do? They threw their trash right into the marsh in the old times. And the marsh became extremely smelly. And so they decided, let's fill in this material and build out the city. And now we're living with the consequences of that choice several hundred years later. Another big problem is around water quality. In Boston, we had the worst water quality in the United States, mostly because of lack of wastewater treatment. We had primary treatment, so kind of basic treatment, but not secondary treatment for many, many years, up until the 1990s. Okay, so not that long ago. And the solution to this was a typical engineering solution, what we think of as gray infrastructure solution, where we spent several $billion and built one of the world's largest wastewater treatment plants, which is this one on the right that you see here called Deer Island. And it's a very advanced wastewater treatment plant. It's humongous. It's the second largest in the United States. And it has some interesting technology that allows us to recover some energy from the treatment process. But it's a very centralized solution. Third problem is Boston is a coastal city, and we're already experiencing very serious consequences from climate change. This is right downtown, right? So Northeastern University is pretty close to this area, and this is a normal flooding event, okay, in 2018, so not that long ago. And we're seeing more and more of this, and it's expected that those areas that were filled in several hundred years ago, those are going to be the prime areas for sea level rise. So we're going to have this issue recurring. Now, to deal with these kind of three separate problems, Boston has embraced nature-based solutions. The city has a whole office responsible for green infrastructure placement, and they are trying to solve all of these together, to manage stormwater, to prevent combined sewer overflows that you heard about, and also to dissipate energy from sea level rise. When there's a big storm that comes in, the storm surge raises the sea level, we get flooding, but at the same time, usually in a big storm, there's a lot of rain. So we have water coming from both sides, and one of the solutions for Boston has been to give it some space, give the water some place to go. So Boston has been very busy in installing green infrastructure all around the city. You can see these different colored dots are all examples of green infrastructure that they've put in. Some of them are very small. Most of them, you don't even know they're there. Right? You're walking around the city, you can't really tell. But you have, for example, infiltration chambers to give water a place to go, dry wells, also permeable pavement, and bioretention basins, more green-looking spaces for allowing infiltration for that water. Here's a few visual examples you can see. The one on the right is very typical. So you have on a roadway some permeable pavement, but also some area for infiltration. In Boston, we have pretty narrow streets. It's an old city, at least for North America. Not old compared to Europe, but old for North America. And so our streets don't have a lot of space. So one of the political challenges is that in order to build green infrastructure like this, we need to take space away from other uses, especially cars and parking. So that's always a challenge. But on the coastal side, this is where green infrastructure has been very ambitious, large scale. So instead of building condos and expensive commercial buildings on the coast, now we're using that space on the left side for open parks that are designed to flood when it rains. So it's no problem. And then they can be recovered pretty easily afterwards. So both large-scale solutions and small-scale solutions. And some pretty wild solutions, some really innovative things. This is a project from a colleague of mine at Northeastern called the Emerald Tutu. You know, tutu is the kind of dress that a ballerina wears. And so you can see this kind of pattern, these different floating wetlands that will go around the city. They help manage phosphorus in the water, and they also help dissipate wave energy during a storm surge event. So this is an idea that the Boston City Council has invested in. They're looking at this, and it would really change the nature of the city coast, but we're open to that. All right, so thank you very much, and I look forward to talking.
Thank you, Matt, for that presentation from Boston, and we are passing on over to Europe, and we have here Gregory Fuchs from the Ecologic Institute in Berlin, and you are a marine ecologist, that's right?
Yeah.
And now focusing also on governance issues and giving us the example of the city of Berlin.
Thank you, Johannes. Hello, everyone in the room, and hello, everyone online. So I'll be talking about governance and management of nature-based solutions in Berlin, and I'll be diving straight in. I'll be talking first a bit about the sewage system in Berlin and then some of the unique challenges we are facing. So we have high density development, a growing population with limited space. We have to retrofit existing infrastructure in a dense city with green solutions. We have a temperate climate in Berlin, but it is becoming drier. Also, we have other climate change effects that I'll come to in a minute. And the combined sewage system in Berlin is basically concentrated to the inner city areas. So the gray shaded is all the inner city areas, and it's 150 years old. Since then, it has been amended. It has been dealt with in a way that I'll introduce to you. But it's really not perfectly suited to the density of the city and to the challenges that we're facing. So we have heavily modified urban areas and water bodies. This is the River Spree that you can see. This is actually the government district, and it's completely sealed, as you can see, lined with concrete, which is impeding the natural flow of the river, which already is comparatively slow. So the Spree is really slow-flowing river compared also to other European rivers, and it doesn't have much gradient. And then we have those city canals in Berlin. Which look really nice, but then sometimes they even reverse with the water. So the water is very, very still, and this causes heavy accumulation of wastewater, which is exacerbating the negative impacts that we're having with the combined sewage overflow. We have surface sealing, as we've heard before. Obviously, in every city this is a problem. We have urban heat, drought also. Berlin has lots of water, but actually it is getting a problem more and more. And then we have flooding after heavy rainfall. So this was in 2017, where large parts of the city flooded, and obviously you have associated problems with pollutants entering the waters. The consequences are sewage overflow events. We have between 33 and 60 per year in the city. So this has been a parameter that's been tracked for decades now. And basically, it's an overflow volume of up to 7.5 million cubic meters per year, which is, has severe consequences to the receiving water bodies. We have a lack of oxygen, we have pollution with bacteria and chemicals that is threatening our biodiversity in the many small water bodies that we have. So Berlin has hundreds of small water bodies, and we have mass die-offs of fish. Which is also causing challenges for the politicians to reach their goals. We have the EU Water Framework Directive, where we're having problems with reaching the objectives, and then there's also the bathing water objective where it looks better. I'll come to those also in a minute. And we're losing ecosystem services, obviously, from those water bodies to society. Urban nature-based solutions we've heard about in the previous talks. They can really provide a solution to those challenges, and also they have co-benefits for society that extend beyond helping with flooding, but they purify the water, we have better air, lots of other factors, and they also play a part when we talk about how does policy respond to those challenges and what are basically the factors of success over time, how are they changing in a city. We have the policy context a little bit. So we have a federal system in Germany, and Berlin is actually municipal and state level both together. It's subdivided into districts that are responsible for land use and environmental planning, that are also implementing the nature-based solutions. Then we have a water management company that was privatized, now is actually back to the city of Berlin, that is in charge of water management. And CSO has been addressed since the 90s with traditional solutions. So we have retention basins where we're trying to address the problem. However, these measures were costly and had limited success. So the storage space program is just the biggest effort by the city to combat this. It's mostly gray infrastructure. It will expire in a year from now, and it has 140 million euros that have been invested. 300,000 cubic meters of space, storage space in the existing system are to be created. This is where we stand now, so a little bit to be done. And while there has been interest and also kind of awareness of nature-based solutions before 2013, it really wasn't in the main political, let's say, agenda and wasn't seen as much. And then we had this research project which looked at the potentials for urban nature-based solutions, assessing the impact for different areas. And this really brought it into the political interest and brought it on the main stage and highlighted the core benefits of what is called a sponge city concept. So a city that's actually helping to take on the rainwater rather than just with these gray solutions that are being done. So the policy context from 2017 onwards, we have quite strict rules. So all new building projects should have a decentralized approach now with no outflow. We have a really ambitious political goal with a yearly reduction of 1% of the surface area connected to the combined sewage system using nature-based solutions. So this is really ambitious. Berlin is on a comparison, giving a really good role model here, but it's not being reached yet. So we have to say where implementation is lacking behind of the ambition there. And we want to seal only as much area as is unsealed elsewhere by 2030. So these are just some of the goals that are also in the coalition agreement of the politicians. We have rules on discharge rates, also for new building projects, but also when the shape of a building changes. So actually, even if you make a new roof, this also applies, that you have this discharge law. However, it's still in an early transition phase, so many of the benefits are not being seen yet because building projects take time, so the real benefits will come into effect soon, but it is a transition phase that we're in, and Berlin is having a strict approach to stormwater management on a comparison. We've talked about this a little bit, but just to say, we have collaboration between different levels of government. We have the EU directive, we have sectoral administrative structures at city level, and then we have the political commitments that we've seen. And it's a joint task of the municipalities to deal with this. One of the things that they set up is a dedicated rainwater agency, primarily to drive this 1% goal. And then also providing consultation services to everyone building in Berlin. It's free, the city pays for it, and it brings players together, ensures knowledge transfer, and so that we really, we're reaping the benefits of the research that we're doing and seeing really the benefits. And then we have the new program that is being set up. So this is the Storage Space Program 2.0, if you will. And it should be, a lot more green. And it will green or pave the way into the future. We'll see about that. But it will definitely include also hybrid and gray solutions, which are needed to some extent, obviously, because the challenges are not getting smaller, they're becoming bigger. However, the funding is not decided yet, and the question is open. Will it be fast and also innovative enough to deal with the challenges that we're faced with? We have citizen involvement and engagement in different levels. So we have the Chorus research project that had these model districts playing through different types of nature-based solutions, seeing what are the benefits, and then we're trying to scale that on a city-wide level. We have education campaigns promoting awareness and that is leading to acceptance of measures. And then we have citizen or citizen science initiatives, such as one that's called Flussbad, so city bathing area, where they're trying to get people basically swimming. They also want to install a filter. It's not sure if the filter actually works, so there's still money being spent on that. But it's helping with making people aware of the problem of combined sewage overflow as well, and with the solutions that are in store or in the process. So concluding, what works well? We have NBS increasingly high on the political agenda. We have ambitious targets. However, transforming streets and public spaces is still slow. So as I said, we have to retrofit. So only a street is done every 100 years. So then you can implement new solutions. But the problem is getting at kind of the existing infrastructure. And then also we have large potentials in existing stock of private owners. But currently this is not being tackled. And as I said before, the measures of success are changing. So we have to adapt, and we have to see that we have co-benefits that we have to provide solutions to, and we have to work more cross-sectorally because getting all those different district and city level authorities and decision makers together to decide on something is actually not so easy. And the takeaway messages for you, so Berlin demonstrates the potential of nature-based solutions, but also the importance of a policy framework and governance structure that supports their implementation. However, we are still in a transition phase. Other cities have implemented more green solutions, actually more green roof incentives and other stuff, but we have a policy framework actually with quite ambitious targets, and we'll reap the benefits hopefully in the coming years. We need more funding, faster implementation, more coordination and cross-sectoral effort, and also engage society continuously. So the challenge is not only ecological and technical, institutional, political and social factors play a huge role in the success of long-term adaptation to climate change. That's it from me. I hope it wasn't too much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you, Greg, for this talk about Berlin. And now we have Lisette de Senap on Domis? And she's a professor. Oh, you say that yourself. That was way too long. But focusing, professor from the Netherlands, and focusing on water systems for quite some time, and especially bridging the gap between the scientific part and the policy part. And she's telling us more about the co-creation processes that they have set up and they have worked on in Rotterdam, and that is now actually being taken over for the entire Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks so much for introducing me. So I'm going to be talking about Rotterdam, and Rotterdam received quite a bit of headlines internationally for becoming a more waterproof, climate resilient city. It also committed to a pledge to become a climate resilient city in the next decades. I would say, bit similar to Berlin, our ambition level is high. Not everything has been implemented as of now, but we sell the idea quite convincingly, apparently, in the international audience. So the approach we take in Rotterdam is we adopt the Nature Futures framework from the IPBS. The IPBS is the Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services. And they developed a framework called the Nature Futures framework, where we recognize three perspectives: nature for people, so more classical ecosystem services approach, so reaping the benefits for the people from ecosystem, and nature as culture. And if you think about it, if in the context of Rotterdam, for instance, nature as culture would be typically more traditional, what you maybe associate with the Netherlands, these canal type of waterways. Nature for people is actually the drinking water aspect, but also water for recreation, and nature for nature is, of course, nature as a place for biodiversity for both flora and fauna. In doing this, we move away from more projection-based thinking with quite a low level of uncertainty, so uncertainty on this axis and agency on that axis. I won't do you the problem of pronouncing Spanish, because I think that will sound a bit silly for you guys. But so typically weather projections they have low agency. You have not so much to say about weather projections, but a low level of uncertainty. If you move around this axis, then you have climate scenarios, so more the scenarios for 2015 or 2100. Those have higher uncertainty level, but also a lower agency. And where we are trying to move to is setting roadmaps for the future. And these roadmaps actually give input to infrastructural plans. If you think about ecological resilience in the context of combined sewage overflows, then you have to think about water quality as well, which we do a lot in the Netherlands, because we have among the worst water quality in Europe. And this is the rolling ball analogy, and I'm always afraid that I'll step over, I'll stumble over cables. But if you are in a situation with low water quality, you're in a valley which is very shallow. So whatever happens, such as an extreme precipitation event, you're bound to get out of this valley and get, for instance, in an alternative stable state. However, if you go through a process, for instance, where you are sustainably improving your water quality, you enter a realm or an alternative stable state which has a much deeper value, becoming more resistant towards, for instance, extreme precipitation events. So I'll be talking about Rotterdam. As said before, Rotterdam is located in the Netherlands, in the southwestern part of the Netherlands. As you may or may not know, we are located below sea level, which comes with a particular set of challenges. So in addition to the flooding events that the previous speakers also talked about, we also have a problem with saltwater intrusion through the source water because of this lower sea level rise. So Rotterdam is a pretty sprawled out city. It harbors one of the biggest ports of the world, so it's a very economically busy area with typically a lot of associated industry to it. This big river is a bit confusing. It's called the New Meuse, but it's actually fed by the river Rhine, so it's kind of a big river, and there's additional rivers coming into it. So it's a typically delta city, but because of our relationship with water, we control our waterways quite heavily in the sense that we control our water level. We have a whole network of sluices, weirs, and water locks that keep our water level quite stable. So kind of what Matt is calling traditionally a kind of an engineered approach towards water management. But so this is the situation now where we look at flooding events, and we see that actually the chances of flooding events are not super high in the current situation. But if we look into the future, these flooding events actually will have a higher likelihood, and that is partly because of the snow water melt actually coming from the Alps, because we are sort of the drain of Europe, and partly because of the high precipitation events, which we'll be seeing especially in the winter times. If you then look at what the consequences are, for instance, for city heat effect, and remember, water plays a role in controlling the city heat effect because of its microclimate regulation, then we see actually that situation is quite dire, right? On the left we have 2015 situation, on the right we have the 2050 situation, which is actually quite close if we think about it. This is not 2100. Then we see that large chunks of the city will have a lot of days above 20 degrees. And that means that we have to do something in terms of climate regulation if we want to sustain our well-being as humans in the city as we had before. The Netherlands are warming up 1.5 degrees faster than the global average. I don't know, we don't exactly know why this is, but this is our reality. So that's also what is sort of reflected in the city heat effect map. And if we then look at this map, which shows in light blue the areas where we have insufficient water retention capacity, you see actually that this is quite a big chunk of the city, and it's especially in the most denselated areas of the city, which actually poses a challenge, right, because of this competition for space. Most of our sewage systems are also, like the previous speakers, are combined sewage overflow, so a kind of an old school type of sewage system. Most of them are gravity sewers, but the ambition is that more and more we go towards these rainwater drainage systems. If we think about future thinking for Rotterdam, and we'll be organizing workshops on this as well, but the city itself is pretty advanced already in its way of thinking of future thinking. Then we're looking at a situation where we, very similar to the Boston situation, will have shoreline parks which cover as flood protection buffer zones. In addition, we'll be looking at what we also call room for rivers. So creating more space, not necessarily through parks, but in more floodplain areas, which allow us actually to have a more dynamic water system. So sort of going back in time in terms of what we used to be as a Netherlands, a very dynamic floodplain. And then you're looking also at more gray type of solutions, and these are these rainwater squares. They received a lot of international attention, and they serve as both as for aesthetic reasons, but also as a water retention basin. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention. And
thank you, Lisette. And now we have time for questions. Questions from the audience here, but also questions from the audience online. So feel free to ask your questions in English, in Spanish, or in Catalan. We do the translation if needed. So, any questions in the room? Well, then okay, that's one.
Thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Juan Carlos. I study about the urban areas, but my interest is about also of the peri-urban and rural areas. What is the challenge with these cities, with the peri-urban, with the challenge and yeah, in this case, because it's different in each city. Thank you.
so if you look at, for instance, the area of Rotterdam, we have nutrient and water balances for most of the areas, or at least on a rudimentary level of the waterscape of Rotterdam. Then you see actually that rural areas play a large part. A lot of the systems, especially on the outer side of the city, they are heavily influenced by inlet water, which has a high level of agricultural emissions. And then it's mostly nutrient emissions, pesticide less so, but it's mostly nutrient emissions. So I do agree that if we want to think about the urban context, we need to start thinking also on how to improve or reduce the nutrient emissions to agricultural waterscapes. Yeah, does that answer your question a bit? Well.
Yeah, thank you for your question, and I have a similar response as Lisette here. So the main river that goes into Boston, I mentioned, is the Charles River, and it's not very long, but much of it goes through some suburban areas. And so we don't have any agriculture in our area. It's not very good farming land, but there's a lot of people who live in these suburban areas, and they put fertilizer on their lawns, right? They have pets, and there's a lot of leaf litter, and all of that contributes phosphorus when it rains a lot, and the phosphorus gets into the water body. So controlling that input of nutrients is very challenging. It's mostly not government land at all, and so we have to come up with a kind of framework for governance and for managing that phosphorus intake that works with many, many different private entities, privately owned land. So that's the big challenge, managing the phosphorus for us.
Who's the other one?
Hi everyone. Sorry. Hi everyone. My question is for Gregory in Berlin about the policies. It was very interesting about the policies that you guys made in Berlin, and I'm most like curious about the one policy that you told us that was like no add flooding from the building scale, that new building projects will have no outflow, And how could you manage this? Like how the project could manage this? Like a little bit more details, if you could speak.
Yes, that's a very good question. I have to say I'm not an expert in those implementation rules, but there's lots of published material and lots of guidelines. So the Rainwater Agency is helping to address exactly these questions because they're being asked by builders and they don't know how to implement them. So they have guidelines for builders that are accessible. But to be honest, I don't know the exact specifics. So I could give you the answer in detail if you want, if I can take your information, but I don't have it on the top of my head.
Thank you.
Thanks for your talks. It was really insightful. I have another question for Gregory about Berlin because, as you said before, Berlin is, the relevance of droughts is increasing. It's going to be a water scarce area quite soon. Actually, east of Berlin, you can already say it's a water scarce area. And you mainly talk about systems, nature-based solutions to deal with stormwater. But what about rainwater harvesting or treating gray water in the buildings or something like this to reduce the water scarcity situation? The point is most of the policies you mentioned are focusing on just one specific issue. What about the water supply for the city or treatment of wastewater at a more decentralized approach? What about those other aspects? Are they also considered in the urban plans or not?
Good question.
Yes, thank you for the question. Very specific questions today. No, I agree. The thing is, my presentation was less focused on the actual nature-based solutions that are being applied, but more on kind of the overall governance framework, and then also some of the very ambitious rules that have been introduced. There's several initiatives, also citizen initiatives for rainwater harvesting, but there's also funding coming from the government and from the city for this as well. Also there's green roof initiative incentives, so where you get money if you install green roofs, and lots of other of those things. So they're not left out. I just didn't focus on them in my presentation, but I think you're definitely right to mention them because they are important. I just wanted to show kind of how it emerged from coming from just very traditional gray solutions, so retention basins, to a new thinking, and how this was gained. So through those research projects, through engaging with stakeholders in participatory processes, and then just learning, okay, how can we get this implemented with this unique governance structure that we have with a federal system and the different districts. So there's vast differences between the districts also. You have districts that are focusing more on heat and saying, okay, we have to tackle this, it's a huge problem, whereas others are saying, okay, no, we have other challenges. And obviously you have to get those more conservative or more forward-thinking districts to implement those solutions. So Friedrichshain-Kreuzberg, for example, is one that's really ambitious, and they want to turn pavements and parking places into green spaces, and then you have others mostly in West Berlin that are more conservative, and then the road and green spaces department say, no, we won't give you we won't give you those spaces to implement those solutions, and this is a problem. On those specificities, yes, they do exist. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that your question and Juan Carlos, was it, are connected with something that we're trying in this project that I think it's important, which is this social, ecological, technological framework that we're trying to implement. Because once you get down from the clouds to the ground, reality hits you hard, right? So, for example, in New York City, maybe drought is still not part of the problem, but the viability of green infrastructure projects is extremely linked to how high the water table is underground. And a lot of places in New York City show potential for nature-based solutions or seem to be in need, but just cannot implement what we think of as a nature-based solution because they are close to the coast, the underground, the phreatic is very high, and because of sea level rise is going to be higher. So even if you have permeability, even if you don't have concrete, that soil is going to be saturated with water. So it's not going to be able to infiltrate. And then linking it to Juan Carlos' question, there's a social or institutional challenge when we think about how is the city itself going to handle the precipitation that falls in, and is that going to be enough to solve all the city's problems around water? Probably not. Or rural and peri-urban areas might fall under different jurisdictions, that need to be considered. So that social, ecological, technological approach is trying to also step back and acknowledge that we're looking at a very complex system of systems with very, very different domains at very different levels. And then how far can we go into really understanding them and being as applicable as possible?
So I would say our social system is a little bit less difficult because we have one water board governing our water management. The municipality is governing our sewage system. So if they have good relationship, which they usually have if they have a climate objective, then this becomes less of a wicked problem than our previous speakers, than my previous speakers have. So it also shows you that if you have unclear or conflicting governance structures, which you often have in a city context, this is something you need to resolve, because otherwise you're in this locked in, right? You're in this locked in of gray infrastructure, and you're not going to move away from this. So that will be interesting to actually see across these different cities what are the typical solutions for this, because I'm sort of guessing some of them might be more focusing on the social system and some on the ecological or technical system.
Yeah, thank you, and I think that's also a good bridge towards Barcelona. We have had some interviews last week with some people in this room who mentioned exactly this, the atomization of players in the water field, and then when adding the green to the water, then becomes even more complex, and then different governance bodies having different goals and authorities in how to act here. So this seems to be a common challenge, even though we have very different biophysical challenges to deal with in the cities. I take advantage and pass the mic to Raya, and Raya is managing the chat online, and there's a few questions that came up there.
Hello everyone. So Maria Ramos Sanz is asking, how do you face the combined challenge of promoting infiltration and high phreatic levels? She also thanks the speakers for their presentations. So the question is, how do you face the combined challenge of promoting infiltration and high phreatic levels?
Yeah, Pablo almost answered that.
I guess that from a sort of urban ecology perspective, you would have to really make a good inventory of what ecological functions you can rely on, and if there's high phreatic levels, then you probably just cannot account on infiltrating water on the ground. But maybe that means that you have, in that kind of location, you have to prioritize storage and building storage tanks or rain barrels that capture the precipitation that falls on the rooftops of buildings, or green roofs. So that is to say that there is more to stormwater management through nature-based solutions than just removing pavement and infiltrating, which is where our mind goes, because it's kind of like an anthology of what the cityscape looks like traditionally, but we're talking about many things to basically just avoid the water from arriving at the sewers too fast. That's normally what we talk about. And of course also other challenges like the ones that have been brought, like avoiding flooding and storing water that could otherwise be drinkable or usable, that is getting lost into the sewers and then emitted into the water bodies.
Sure, thanks. So I'm going to give you the engineering answer because in Boston we have a similar situation. And it's not just about storage, it's about timing. So if sea level is high and the water table has risen and it's raining, then it's really, really difficult because the water has nowhere to go. So part of the trick is to design nature-based solutions that work in concert with the gray infrastructure solutions that are already there, to give enough time for the sea level to go down, and then you can allow drainage. In Boston, we have a lot of underwater storage and pumps. We actually dammed the river completely, so the river itself acts as a gigantic storage vessel for the rain when it comes in. And then the sea level goes down, we open the dam, and the river goes out. So this is a very expensive solution, and I'm not advocating this for Barcelona, of course. But having a design that allows these types of strategies to work in concert has been effective.
Yeah, it's good to realize that nature-based solutions need space and they need pace. So they are often more slow working than and more spacious than gray solutions. So I always think, at least in the context of the Netherlands, we have to have a combination of great infrastructures to capture these hazards that come with flood events, which it's very similar if I think about the Boston situation and the Rotterdam situation. And then you have your green solutions to buffer this, sort of. So I think of gray solutions sort of accelerating the effect or assisting the effect of nature-based solutions. But we're now on this, partly enforced by the EU, on this holy grail of nature-based solutions. To be honest, I don't think that's always realistic in an urban context where space is often scarce, right? And you work with a lot of different types of stakeholders, which all have a different interest in the water.
Thank you. There was one more question online. And
Yes, so one more question from Patricia Escortia. She thanks you for the presentations, and she's asking if you keep track of the pollutants infiltrated to the groundwater from the sewage overflows.
Yeah, so we monitor, of course, in the context of Water Framework Directive and other directives as well. So most in a city of Rotterdam, it's mostly nutrient contaminant, but also a little bit of pesticides from the agricultural areas. It's not yet mandated by the EU, but we're also monitoring personal care products and pharmaceuticals, and this increasingly becomes an issue in an urban context, especially during sewage overflow situations. Because at present, and I don't know about the Spanish situation, we don't have targeted removal of pharmaceuticals, emerging pollutants, if you will, and that creates a problem in our cities. And what you now already see during flooding events, you see high peaks in these type of emerging pollutants. And this includes, of course, also things you may not think about, but these are microplastics, car tire dust, these type of things, yeah.
Maybe I can add something from a different project. So this is not published yet, but it's a project looking at the EcoStat EU countries, and it's monitoring, so it's tracking where would you have research and monitoring on litter in different environments. So we were looking at freshwater environments, groundwater, soils, and then transitional waters, so saline waters. And so what we found is that in most EU countries there is research and monitoring on freshwater and soils, also to some extent on saline waters, but groundwater is really far behind. And so litter, so that is also microplastic in groundwater, is almost no monitoring, and also no plans for monitoring in the future. So this, and we had 28 countries participating in this, so it's currently in publication. I find this quite an interesting fact. Yeah, just wanted to share that with you.
Thanks. Yeah, same situation in the United States. We don't usually monitor pollutant infiltration into ground water systems. However, there's extensive monitoring of nutrients in combined sewer overflows into the river. In part, I showed you the build-out, this very large treatment plant in Boston. That was because of a federal legal challenge. So we have federally mandated testing extensively, and this has driven the uptake of nature-based solutions. So in fact, the pollutant loading has gone down by something like 95% in the Boston area. So this is something that we're tracking carefully and has been a driver of progress.
Okay, yeah, thank you all for these perspectives from your towns. And we are now breaking for coffee for 25 minutes, I would say. And then we see each other here in the room again with the Catalan part, so 12. We meet here again for the second part and the workshop to discuss what are the challenges here in Barcelona and what are our future visions for the urban water system in Barcelona metropolitan area. Thank you so much, and you are around during the coffee break and the next days in Barcelona during our annual meeting of the NICHES project. Thanks for having you.